Introducing Sarah and her married life in America. Sarah Miller, a vibrant 27-year-old from Austin, Texas, had always been seen as the embodiment of the American dream. Driven, witty, and effortlessly charming, she built a promising career as a marketing manager in a cutting-edge tech startup downtown. Sarah's world sparkled, not just with professional success, but with the kind of personal fulfillment many admired from afar. She was married to Robert Clark, a 32-year-old senior analyst at a major investment firm. Together, they lived in a modern loft that overlooked the city's bustling skyline, a symbol of their hard-earned achievements and shared ambitions. Sarah's days were a whirlwind of business meetings, brainstorming sessions, and after-hours events. But home was where she recharged. Robert, equally ambitious yet composed, was known for his sharp mind and easygoing humor, balancing out Sarah's energetic nature. Their love story had started back in college, forged by laughter and late-night study sessions, and for years it felt unbreakable. Family gatherings and weekends with friends showcased their warm, supportive bond. Their social circle included Emma Parker, Sarah's best friend since their college dorm days, a confidant who practically became part of their household. In the eyes of their friends and colleagues, Sarah and Robert were the golden couple, two rising stars with bright futures, and a relationship built on trust and shared dreams. Behind the laughter and Instagram-perfect snapshots, Sarah prided herself on her independence, loyalty, and the deep sense of partnership she and Robert had built from the ground up. She never imagined that beneath this polished life in America, shadows of deceit and betrayal were quietly taking root, subtle signs and a stirring of suspicion. Looking back, it was never one big event that signaled something was off. It was the accumulation of small, almost inconspicuous changes. Sarah first noticed Robert coming home later than usual, often blaming crunch time at the office or last-minute meetings he couldn't avoid. There were business trips that appeared out of nowhere, sometimes with just a brief text to let her know he'd be away. The easy flow of their evening conversations grew stilted. Robert seemed distracted, glancing at his phone mid-dinner or slipping away to take calls he said were from clients. Sarah tried to brush off her unease, reminding herself that both of them had demanding careers. But the excuses started to sound hollow, especially when paired with a new password on Robert's phone and his reluctance to share weekend plans. She'd find herself lying awake at night, replaying snippets of their conversations, analyzing his expressions and the tone of his voice. Emma, always the voice of reason, noticed Sarah's restlessness, but chalked it up to stress at work, until she witnessed Robert dodging questions during a double date. One particular Friday evening stuck with Sarah. Robert stepped outside to take a call, and she caught a glimpse of a name flash across his screen. Jessica White, another familiar presence in their circle of friends, but someone Sarah had always trusted implicitly. The sight left her chest tight and thoughts spiraling. Her intuition, often drowned out by logic, now rang louder than ever before, whispering that something precious was slipping away. Sarah couldn't ignore the mounting signs, no matter how determined she was to hold on to the image of their perfect life. In those quiet moments of doubt, a sense of betrayal began to flicker just beneath the surface, urging her to look more closely at the cracks forming in her marriage. The painful discovery. The day began like any other. It was an overcast Thursday morning at the end of October, thick with that particular chill Chicago brought before winter set in. Sarah poured herself a cup of coffee, idly scrolling through her emails, trying to focus on a demanding project deadline. Ethan had left early, citing a surprise client breakfast downtown. She barely glanced up as he called, "See you tonight," from the doorway, lost in calculations and campaigns. But the ordinary gave way to the extraordinary. With a simple ping, Sarah received a text from Melanie. "Hey, are you joining us after work at the Ivy Room?" At first, Sarah thought of passing. Her mind was tangled. She felt exhausted. But on a whim, she replied, yes. Melanie, always cheerful, typed back, "Great. A bunch of us are meeting at 6. The Ivy Room, an upscale bar nestled in an old stone building, had seen countless after-hours gatherings from Sarah's group. Arriving in her trench coat, she was greeted by soft jazz and the low hum of conversation. In the corner, Melanie waved her over from a table surrounded by familiar faces. Co-workers, friends, warm laughter in the midst of city gray. Sarah began to relax, losing herself in stories and clinking glasses. As the night slipped by, Sarah excused herself, weaving through the throng toward the restrooms. That's when the world tilted. Through glass doors leading to a quieter back patio, Sarah caught a glimpse of Ethan, her Ethan, leaning intimately over a table, deep in conversation with Megan Carter. There was a hush to their interaction, the way his hand rested gently atop Megan's, the closeness far exceeding mere friendship. Sarah's heart thudded so violently, she thought even the jazz band could hear. Unseen, she watched as Ethan leaned in closer. Megan touched his cheek, and, there in the low, amber-lit corner, Ethan pressed a kiss to her lips. The sight pulled Sarah into a vortex of disbelief and pain, freezing her in place while the city pulsed on, unaware. She wanted to burst onto the patio, to scream, to demand an explanation. But all she managed was to stand, invisible, shielded by the shadows and her pounding grief. Time seemed suspended. Eyes burning, Sarah quietly left through a side exit, unnoticed by friends and betrayers alike. Out in the windy city street, she gasped for breath. Her mind raced. Were there other times, other places, other lies? The snippets of secrecy, the vague explanations, the sudden changes, none of them were innocent. Each pointed to this single, shattering truth. Ethan, the man she'd trusted more than anyone, the man she built a home with, had crossed a line she could never forgive. Sarah walked for over an hour, replaying the scene so vivid, it felt branded into her memory. Anger fiercely battled heartbreak. How easily had she ignored all the subtle warnings? How swiftly had her carefully woven life unraveled? When she finally made it home, Ethan was already in bed, feigning sleep. The mask of normalcy painted perfectly. Sarah changed into her pajamas, slipped under the covers, and lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, clutching her pillow, holding back waves of anguish and betrayal. In the fragile dark hours, Sarah's mind ran wild. She cataloged every recent conversation, every change in Ethan's pattern, searching for anything she might have missed. She remembered Melanie's watchfulness, the quiet concerns they'd half-voiced, the gut feeling she'd tried to dismiss. And now, in the silence, there was nothing left to doubt. But as a new day crept into the sky, Sarah made a promise to herself.
Welcome.
She would not be consumed by this pain.
Thank you.
She would not react blindly or let anger guide her next steps. Yes, her world had shattered, but in its ruins, a cold, clear resolve was taking shape. Whatever came next, Sarah would reclaim control, making sure Ethan and Megan understood just how deeply their betrayal had cut. The art of subtle revenge. That sleepless night marked a turning point for Sarah. As dawn crept through Austin's glass towers, She realized rage alone would never give her peace. She was too smart to lash out blindly, too proud to despair in private, while Robert and Jessica continued unchecked. The plan that took seed in her tormented mind was neither impulsive nor reckless. Instead, it was calculated, painstakingly thoughtful in its cruelty and its elegance. Sarah started with small steps. She knew that any act of revenge needed careful groundwork to avoid repercussions and maximize impact. With her keen eye for detail, a skill she'd honed in her analytics-heavy job, she began to gather evidence. She combed through old text messages when Robert was asleep or in the shower. Any hint of conversation between Robert and Jessica was forwarded quietly to her private email account. Cryptic winks, suspiciously timed jokes, even digital receipts of their shared dinners marked as business. She logged every unexplained business trip on a color-coded calendar, cross-referencing with Jessica's social posts for clues. Sarah's professionalism paid off. Never once did she confront Robert or act out of turn. She played her role, asking casually about work, making small talk at dinner parties, and masking her pain behind perfectly practiced smiles. She enlisted Emma's help subtly, suggesting, for instance, that Emma invite Jessica to more group events. The increased proximity made it easier to catch moments of longing glances, nervous laughter, and quick texts exchanged under the table. The next phase of Sarah's plan required patience. She installed a discreet audio recording app on a portable charging block that Robert always carried with him, a gift from Sarah, which he happily accepted. She made sure to gift Jessica a similar item during a company mixer, feigning generous goodwill. Soon, her inbox filled with hours of muffled admissions and unguarded confessions. She sorted and dated every file, creating a digital timeline so complete it would have impressed any detective. But the true brilliance of Sarah's revenge wasn't just in collecting proof. It was how she weaponized it. Sarah knew Robert and Jessica were both up for major promotions at their companies, with their reputations hinging on integrity and trust. Sarah waited for the perfect moment, when both were in the spotlight, vying for leadership roles. On the eve of the joint office party celebrating the new product launch, Sarah quietly sent the evidence: audio files, screenshots, even candid photos, to their respective HR departments, mailing them from an anonymous account with a concise, damning note: "You deserve to know who represents your company." The next days unfolded in slow motion. Sarah watched Robert and Jessica unravel as the companies began their investigations. All the while, Sarah herself was a picture of composure, never raising her voice or arousing suspicion. She neither gloated nor confessed to anyone. She simply observed the chaos her calculated vengeance had sown, understanding that justice, when served cold and measured, cut deeper than any impulsive confrontation ever could. Her silence and poise became the final stroke. Robert and Jessica faced professional disgrace, their promotions revoked, and their images irreparably stained. Those who had questioned Sarah's intuition in quieter times now rallied around her resilience. Though the pain of betrayal lingered, Sarah found a measure of satisfaction in knowing she'd reclaimed the narrative, ensuring those who'd wounded her would carry that mark into every future professional endeavor. The perfectly timed punishment. The city buzzed with anticipation during the annual Mile High Business Summit, Denver's flagship event, where rising professionals and industry veterans gathered to share strategies and celebrate their successes. Rachel had selected her moment carefully, with both Lucas and Olivia set to be honored during the Friday evening gala. Everyone expected speeches, applause, and the kind of networking that set the tone for the rest of the year. The days leading up to the event were electric for the city's business, community, but behind closed doors, turbulence brewed. Rachel knew her evidence would soon bring the secret into an inescapable spotlight. On the morning of the gala, Lucas arrived at work to find an emergency meeting waiting for him. The head of HR, together with his direct supervisor, greeted him in the glass-walled conference room. Faces unreadable, folders of documents stacked before them. Lucas, always so composed, tried to keep his cool as they laid out the details. Hotel receipts, emails, timesheets that didn't match, audio that suggested a level of familiarity with a client, Olivia Hayes, that far exceeded professionalism. His explanations fell apart quickly as he was confronted with specifics only someone close could have gathered. Meanwhile, Olivia was called into her own HR office, blindsided as she was shown the same dossier. Evidence of her breach, not only of company policy, but of client trust. Her attempted denials became tangled as investigators traced her activities to personal messages, company events, and little white lies that lined up far too neatly with Lucas's timeline. For the rest of the day, both were placed on immediate administrative leave, pending formal review. A euphemism everyone in the downtown business scene understood as 1 foot out the door. Word traveled fast. Colleagues, supervisors, and even clients whispered about what had happened, piecing together gossip and half-truths. In an era when reputation was often more valuable than skill, both Lucas and Olivia watched their hard-fought careers crumble in real time. That evening, as Rachel entered the stunningly lit ballroom, her posture tall, her smile serene, she felt the eyes of the room follow her. She'd chosen a simple blue dress, classic but radiant, and walked in arm with Zoe, her loyal friend through every storm. She crossed paths with Lucas, standing on the fringe of the crowd, shell-shocked and alone, his name now whispered in tones of scandal rather than admiration. Olivia was nowhere to be seen, her outreach and media panels canceled, her absence noted by more than a few industry insiders. Throughout the night, Rachel maintained her composure, conversing easily with old friends and new contacts. She participated in a leadership Q&A, her poise and confidence on full display. When people asked politely after Lucas or Olivia, she merely replied, "We're all adapting to some changes. Life has a way of teaching us who we are." There was no malice in her voice, only an understated satisfaction that justice had not been dramatic, but meticulous and irreversible. Back home, Rachel allowed herself to breathe for what felt like the first time in months. She stood by the living room window, reflecting on how every strand of her careful plan had led to this night. Not just Lucas and Olivia's consequences, but her own reclamation of dignity and narrative. She no longer felt powerless or wrecked, as she had on those first nights of heartbreak. Instead, she was a new version of herself, wiser, stronger, and finally, the fallout was swift and undeniable. By Monday morning, both Lucas and Olivia were officially suspended pending their terminations. The golden couple of their firms, now infamous in every office chat. Those who'd questioned Rachel's intuition now offered support and apologies. She was invited to join a major leadership project at her own company, a recognition both of her professional abilities and her resilience amidst chaos. Friends in their social circle struggled with divided loyalties, but many quietly respected the grace and intelligence with which Rachel had navigated such devastation. Lucas moved out of the townhouse, leaving behind a note filled with hollow regrets and half-finished explanations. Olivia, for her part, sent flowers, a gesture Rachel neither returned nor acknowledged. As the Denver skyline blushed pink and gold each evening, Rachel began building new routines. She threw herself into her work, adopted a rescue dog named Scout, and started taking pottery classes with Zoe. The pain lingered, sure, and some nights the loneliness was still palpable. But Rachel knew the worst was past, and her future now belonged solely to herself. The journey of healing and rediscovering herself. The aftermath of betrayal and revenge was never destined to be neat or painless. For Sarah, the days following her meticulously orchestrated reckoning ricocheted between moments of exhausted relief and gaping, existential uncertainty. When the storm she had conjured finally subsided, leaving Robert and Jessica to weather the fallout, Sarah found herself staring at the silent ruins of her old life. The echoes of laughter, the sparkle of city lights from their loft, the traces of a love story immortalized in countless photos. Every memory now felt tinged with a lingering ache. Yet, as autumn winds swept over Austin, she realized the next chapter belonged to her alone. Facing the aftermath, the first few weeks were filled with a strange quiet. The world outside seemed unchanged. People on the street continued their daily routines. Halloween decorations cropped up along South Congress Avenue. And yet, Sarah felt as if she were drifting through someone else's dream. Emma, loyal, unwavering Emma, visited regularly, bringing homemade soup and a patient ear. Some nights, Sarah let herself cry softly in the haze before sleep, letting the pain move through her rather than clinging to it. Other days, she wandered Lady Bird Lake, letting the wind tousle her hair, watching rowers cut through green water as she tried to picture a new future. Old patterns broke down. Emails from work piled up, unanswered for days. She stopped reading the news and instead buried herself in novels. Stories of survival, transformation, reclamation. Her therapist became a lifeline, and each session was a gentle nudge toward self-forgiveness. She learned that her grief had layers: loss of trust, loss of the partner she thought she knew, and the deeper disbelief that she could lose herself inside someone else's betrayal. Learning to grieve and let go. If revenge tasted sweet in the moment, its aftertaste was sobering. There was satisfaction in reclaiming her agency, but no true sense of celebration. At night, she often asked herself, was it all worth it? Would she change anything if given another chance? The answers shifted with her moods. Some days, she felt powerful and righteous. On others, she yearned for the naive peace of her marriage before she saw its cracks. The simple distractions, Netflix binges, cups of wine with Emma, the hum of the city, brought comfort. But Sarah knew she couldn't hide from her pain forever. She chose, deliberately, to keep going. Step by step, she purged their apartment of shared reminders. She replaced the prints on the wall with her own photos. Snapshots from past travels, the sea in Santorini, cherry blossoms in DC, summer rain in Seattle. She boxed up Robert's things with a methodical calm and left them with a courteous, final note by the door. The loft grew emptier, but also more hers, an environment stripped to its bones, yet open for possibility. Small steps to independence. Sarah eventually returned to work. At her desk, she faced an inbox that felt daunting at first, a monument to a life on pause. Her colleagues, previously envious of her dazzling marriage, now greeted her with the warmth reserved for quiet warriors and survivors. They asked few questions, offering understanding smiles, subtle gestures of support. Fresh coffee, a sticky note with a joke. Sarah rediscovered the thrill of her job, the untangling of a stubborn campaign problem, the buzz of a product launch. the camaraderie of late-night brainstorms. She started volunteering with a local nonprofit, helping young women find jobs in tech, channeling her own resilience into encouragement for others. Outside of work, she built new routines from scratch. She signed up for a pottery class and found unexpected joy in the feel of damp clay, the patient spinning of the wheel, the messy satisfaction of creating something from nothing. She reconnected with her brother in San Diego, flying out on a whim to surf, badly, comically, but with an immense sense of liberation. She spent quiet Sundays in coffee shops, journaling her thoughts, writing unsent letters to her old self. The city's rhythm became a balm, farmers' markets on Saturdays, concerts by the river, catching sunrises from her balcony, with strong, black coffee warming her hands. Building a new circle healing was not just a solitary endeavor. With gradual courage, Sarah opened herself to new connections. She met Maya, a dog walker with a laugh that rattled the windows, during an early morning run in Zilker Park. Their friendship was built on the simple pleasure of honesty, sharing stories of heartbreak, ambitions, the joy of starting over. Through Maya, Sarah joined an informal book club, a motley group of women, some single, some divorced, all invested in rebuilding their lives. Together, they wove a fabric of sisterhood where vulnerability was valued over perfection. Sarah became a pillar for others, too. She told her story in safe spaces, at first with trembling hands and a wavering voice, then with steady resolve. She learned with each telling that her scars were not signs of weakness, but testaments to her courage. "You're stronger than you think," someone told her after one meeting. For the first time, Sarah believed it might be true. Rediscovering joy and possibility, months passed, and the gaping wound finally dulled to a tender scar. Sarah celebrated little triumphs: her first pottery mug that didn't wobble, her promotion at work, the laughter that tumbled from her lips without warning. The skyline view outside her window was no longer a reminder of what she had lost, but a symbol of the world waiting for her exploration. She learned, slowly, to trust herself. Some evenings, loneliness crept in, but Sarah discovered how to sit with it, let it teach her patience and self-compassion. When memories of Robert surfaced, she met them with kindness, remembering the love without ignoring the hurt, acknowledging the chapters closed without dwelling on them. And one golden afternoon, as bluebonnets carpeted the Texas fields and sunlight streamed into her home, Sarah understood that she didn't need to be healed to move forward. Strength, she realized, came from the willingness to begin again. Fragile and uncertain, but full of hope, she started planning a solo trip, perhaps to the Pacific Northwest or winding roads of Portugal. Not as an escape, but as a celebration of everything she had already survived. The ongoing journey. To outsiders, Sarah's recovery might have looked effortless, polished, a perfect Instagram narrative of resilience. But Sarah knew the truth. Healing wasn't linear or glamorous, and even now, grief and anger sometimes brushed her heart. Yet each day, she built a little more trust in herself, found new sources of inspiration, new reasons to laugh. Sarah's story became a quiet testimony, not of destruction, not of revenge, but of reclamation. By refusing to let betrayal define her, by protecting her self-worth at all costs, she laid the foundation of a new life richer and more authentic than the old. The pain never vanished entirely, but its sharp edges wore smooth over time, replaced by gratitude for friends who stood by her, for chance encounters that sparked new beginnings, for the indomitable spirit inside her that refused to give up. An unsettling, open ending. even as the months pressed on and Sarah's life began to reshape itself. The story never truly settled into the kind of neat resolution found in fiction. Instead, what transpired left behind a lingering unease, one that everyone in her orbit felt, even if only as a shadow, on the edge of their thoughts. For while Sarah reclaimed a measure of peace and control, the echoes of her ordeal never quite left her, and the ripples of her choices extended far beyond her own healing. Sarah's name, once synonymous with the power couple allure, now carried a strange new weight in her city's social and professional circles. Some whispered with awe about her legendary composure. Others traded rumors about the dramatic way Robert and Jessica's careers had crumbled. It wasn't lost on anyone that Sarah never publicly claimed responsibility for their fall. She let the truth settle over the crowd in silence, a choice that only fueled the mystery. At networking events, former acquaintances would offer thin smiles or furtive, calculating glances, debating whether she was someone to impress or avoid. Sarah felt the change acutely every time she walked into a crowded room. Once, her ambition and openness had been her calling cards. Now, people measured their words around her, uncertain where her boundaries lay or how far they could trust her. She was not immune to the consequences of her own actions, of course. There were colleagues who avoided her, fearing her quiet intelligence and unflinching resolve. There were also moments when the weight of what she had set in motion pressed upon her in the early hours, a knot in her chest, a sense of dislocation. Even as she pieced together a new existence, a small voice inside her sometimes questioned whether she truly gained victory at all, or if the price had simply changed form. There were days the city itself seemed haunted by her story. Passing by familiar coffee shops or catching a reflection in the window of a store where she and Robert once shopped, Sarah would feel something cold flutter behind her ribs, a fleeting reminder of all that had been shattered and all that had been built from the ruins. She learned to move through these moments with a kind of wary grace, allowing herself space to feel both pride and remorse. Perhaps most haunting of all was her relationship with trust. New friends and would-be suitors drifted in and out of her life, but Sarah always kept part of herself carefully guarded. The thought of letting someone in so deeply, again, both terrified and intrigued her. She became, over time, both less open and somehow more present, her conversations more intentional, her boundaries better defined, her smile slower to appear, but more genuine when it did. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah found herself playing out possible futures in her mind. Would she ever truly leave the past behind? Or would the shadows of what happened follow her wherever she went? The city outside her window pulsed with endless possibility. Yet in her heart, the fear of another betrayal, subtle or spectacular, remained a quiet but steady drumbeat. The people around her, too, bore witness to the complexity of an ending without closure. Emma, her steadfast friend, once broached the subject over a glass of red wine on Sarah's balcony. "You know," she said gently, "there's not always a happily ever after, but there's still something after, and you decide what that looks like." Sarah smiled sadly. She had always known the story wouldn't wrap up cleanly. Sometimes she wondered whether any of us actually reach the end of our own stories, or if we simply live in the aftermath of the choices we make day after day. The sting of betrayal faded with time, but the imprint of her journey, her fight for justice, the pain and triumph of survival, remained a part of her, stitched into the fabric of every new experience. The fate of Robert and Jessica was never revisited publicly. They slipped from public view, Robert departing Austin for a quieter job in another state. Jessica starting over with distant relatives. Occasionally, Sarah would hear a whisper of their names in conversations or see an unexpected LinkedIn update. Each time, the temptation to reach out was strong, but she resisted. Whatever reckoning remained for them, it was not hers to influence further. As for Sarah, the rhythm of her life took on a quiet defiance. She found solace in small routines, morning runs along Lady Bird Lake, spontaneous road trips out of town, laughter-filled Sunday brunches with her new friends. She built a life that acknowledged her past but refused to be eclipsed by it. A mosaic of scars, wisdom, and the unexpected joy of rediscovering her own company. And yet, on some dusky evenings, she would sit on her balcony, watching the city flicker to life as darkness settled, wrestling with the question of what it meant to truly move on. The future stretched out before her, both exhilarating and unknowable. Would she trust again, love again, risk her heart on the uncertain promise of another? The ending to Sarah's story was, in truth, no ending at all. Rather, it became an open door, a threshold haunted by memory, but alive with possibility. In the quiet, she allowed herself to hope for a love untouched by deceit, for friendships that would not falter, for a peace that need not be won through struggle. Even as the past lingered on the periphery, Sarah pressed forward, her spirit marked by resilience and by the lingering, poignant ache of the story she carried with her. In that, perhaps, is the most honest resolution there is. A life interrupted, rebuilt, and always slightly haunted by what came before.